Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in. I'm going to be installing a clutch set in this 18 Wrangler. It has 33,000 miles on it. It's already smoked. The release bearing is really noisy. You can see the flange of the release bearing is just convex or concave, and the fingers on the pressure plate are like halfway worn through. I suspect this customer would rest their foot on the clutch pedal. So we'll go ahead and remove these bolts on the pressure plate. Then we'll go ahead and pry this pressure plate off. Make sure it doesn't come down and smack you in the head. This clutch disc is well worn. It's worn down almost to the rivets. Inside the bell housing is packed with clutch dust. The splines are rusty. We got heat scoring on the pressure plate and the flywheel. We'll go ahead and pull the bolts for this flywheel. I'm going to go ahead and remove one and then just leave it in loose so it doesn't come flying out at me. Go ahead and work this flywheel off. It's kind of heavy, so gotta be careful there. Next, I'm going to use my bushing driver set. We're going to go ahead and install this pilot bearing. And this pilot bearing will sit flush on the inside of the flywheel. There's a little seal inside this bearing. Got to make sure it faces out. So we'll just tap that in until it's flush. Next, install the new flywheel. And this will only bolt in there one way. So you got to index it so the bolt holes line up. Install all the bolts. Go ahead and lightly snug them up. These are a torque to yield bolt. The first step is to torque to 19 foot-pounds. And then we're going to stretch them. We're going to go into angle mode. We're going to go an additional 60 degrees. Go ahead and stretch all the bolts. And then this Clutch disc, it only goes in one way. It says flywheel side, so make sure you put that in correctly. I also clean the pressure plate and the flywheel with alcohol or brake cleaner. Make sure there's no oil on the surface. And we'll install our pilot tool that comes in the set. Start that into the pilot bearing. Then we'll index this pressure plate until it lines up with the dowels. Then I'm going to lightly snug up the bolts for the pressure plate so I can just barely move that disc. And what I'm going to try to do here is find the sweet spot. Move that disc until it's perfectly centered. That helps aid to install the transmission. Then we'll go ahead and work these bolts in. And you want to just go little by little and just keep working all the way around it until you get them snugged up. And the pilot tool slips in and out nice and easy. That's what we want. Next, we'll torque these pressure plate bolts down to 24 foot-pounds. Next, we'll lube everything up. I'm using some Evinrude Johnson Marine high pressure grease. Any type of high pressure grease will work in this situation. Put a big dab inside this clutch fork, and then I go ahead and coat all the contact areas on the fork and on the release bearing. Put a small amount of grease. We'll hit the contact areas on the clutch fork. Then we'll go ahead and install this pilot bearing. It's got these spring clips. This one fits in really tight. I had to use a screwdriver and kind of pry up on them while pushing in. Go ahead and slide that in. Clutch fork and release bearing are ready to install. I'm going to go ahead and lube up this snout on the transmission. You don't want to put too much grease here. There was a little bit of grease in the new release bearing, but I go ahead and add a little bit more. Slide our fork in. Snap it on the pivot. Make sure it moves freely. Wipe off any excess grease. It moves nice and free. The clutch set has spline lube in it that comes with it. So I like to use what they give you and lube the input shaft splines. You don't want to get too much grease, but I like to completely coat the entire spline area on this input shaft. If you get too much, it can fling out and get on the clutch disc. There you go. This one's all installed, ready to install the transmission. Thanks for watching, everyone.